Hey all, your OS reviews. In this video, we're taking a quick look at the Bigme Hibreak. This is a e-ink smartphone, quite unique or pocket-sized e-reader, and serves as an alternative to the Boox Palma that we also checked out a couple of months back and has been quite popular. However, there's a couple of differences that we can observe right from the jump, being that the Hibreak is slightly more compact at 5.84 inches for the display compared to 6.1 inches on the Palma. And so for me at least, it's a little bit more comfortable to slide into pockets as well as hold with one hand due to the bigger bezels. It's kind of a pro or plus size device and often strikes people by surprise when they first pick it up. This is going to be a lot more, I would say, easy to grip if you have slightly smaller hands. The other difference being that the Palma does not come with any built-in cellular capabilities. It's a phone-sized e-reader, but there is no 4G or 5G built on in, compared to Bigme, where you can actually pop in a SIM card and it is a 4G LTE device. So in addition to Wi-Fi, you can connect to mobile internet anywhere you are, perhaps making it a little bit more versatile. And in terms of pricing, I would say Bigme have also been quite competitive. The black and white version that we're looking at here retails for $250, which undercuts the official retail cost of the Palma by around $30, although with both of these devices, you can often find discounts bringing it even lower. This is just the official retail cost. There is a slightly more expensive color version though, which is quite unique, and that is instead of the black and white traditional monochrome e-ink screen, that uses Kaleido, so you have a color e-ink panel instead. Perhaps beneficial if you're looking at comics or images a little bit more. In terms of dimensions, relatively lightweight at 170 grams, processor, memory are all the same across the two versions. That being said, the PPI and sharpness, or resolution I should say, of the two screens are also slightly different. Very interestingly, the color e-ink screen version has a 275 PPI for displaying black and white content, and additional 92 for color, and that is compared to 300 PPI for the black and white version screen. So if you're only looking at text and you don't really care about color, this one is actually a touch sharper and more crisp, not to mention because a color e-ink screen technically has another layer in the display stack. When you are looking at only black and white content like text, you can tell it's a little bit more grayish in the color compared to the only black and white display version that we have in front of us. So some minor compromises in terms of the black and white version here might be a little bit more crisp for the PPI, as well as having better contrast when it comes to the whites versus the blacks. However, the color version might be a little better for, again, looking at comics or images. Regardless, it's nice to have that choice, which is something that the Boox Palma does not have. It's only available in black and white. Now, a closer look at the design of the Hibreak. This black and white variant also comes with a factory pre-applied matte screen protector that reduces some of the glare, and otherwise there's a earpiece along with a front-facing camera, because this one is a true smartphone. So if you wanted to install apps for messaging, you could possibly do that, compared to the Bigme is actually missing the front-facing camera there. Might not be super significant, but just one other difference. And the rails of the phone are crafted out of polycarbonate plastic, but the buttons on the Hibreak are crafted out of metal, compared to the Palma is crafted entirely out of plastic. It does give it a slightly more premium touch in my opinion. However, with both of these devices, you will not find any 3.5mm headphone jack. That is a little unfortunate and means if you're listening to audiobooks or music, you can use the loudspeaker or connect to wireless Bluetooth headphones or opt for a dongle if you need to use an analog pair of headphones. Located on the left-hand spine is a remappable hotkey that can be programmed to various functions, kind of similar to the Palma in this regard. There's also the dual SIM card as well as micro SD card slot that can expand on the 128GB of built-in storage. The back otherwise has this kind of synthetic leather finish, adding a little bit more of grip and texture to the device. Really not bad, and also serves as an alternative again to a similar overall texture that the Palma also have, and both devices do share the rear-facing camera at around 13 megapixels with autofocus and an LED flash. Finally, located on the right-hand spine is going to be the volume rocker, which when you are reading will also serve as page turn controls in addition to the power key. And before we dive deeper into the performance and software, also a quick look at the packaging. It is quite minimal. In fact, inside we have only the phone smartphone itself, plus a quick user guide and a SIM card ejector pin. That's it. There is no Type-C cable or charger included anymore, kind of taking a page from Apple in this regard. A couple of other top-line specs include a MediaTek P35 octa-core processor clocked at 2.3 GHz, which is assisted by 6 GB of RAM and 128 gigs of built-in storage. Now, for smartphone fanatics out there, you guys may know that the, again, P35 isn't necessarily a flagship-grade processor, but keep in mind that you're primarily using this thing for reading things like Kindle, as well as PDFs, web browsing, as opposed to really even consuming videos or gaming. So I would argue that a slightly weaker chipset is mostly fine considering the type of content that you are consuming on a device like this. It's comparable roughly to the Palma, which shares similar specs in terms of RAM as well as octa-core processor as well, though it is a Qualcomm Snapdragon chip versus MediaTek. But in all honesty, this one has been performing fine. The built-in battery on the Hibreak here is 3,300 milliamp hours, and similar to the Palma and other Android-powered e-readers, I would say the overall endurance will vary depending on what you're doing on the device. For instance, if you are accessing social media in addition to having cellular Wi-Fi turn on 24/7 and just really touching the phone very frequently, then it will last roughly 2 days before you have to recharge it again. But if you're more sporadic, turning off wireless options, only using it for simple reading, then it can definitely stretch into weeks, if not even longer, similar to on a Kindle. Basically, how often you're refreshing the screen will also dictate how long the battery will last, since one of the special advantages of e-ink is when it's sitting persistently on an image without anything changing, it's actually not draining any power. It's only when you're refreshing the page or changing it, the pixels have to rearrange and draw a little bit of current, plus the better outdoor readability. If you're in direct sunlight, it behaves really similar to just a piece of paper in a book. So shining more light on the screen makes it even more readable, unlike with traditional displays that just adds to the glare and reflection, where you have to crank the brightness all the way up and still find yourself struggling to see it, if not draining significantly more power compared to an e-ink panel. So great for reading purposes. And in darker environments, there is still a front light on the Hibreak with 36 different adjustable levels, still reading quite comfortably at night or if you're lying in bed, for instance. Although this is one other slight difference compared to the Palma is it only has this one color for the front light, which is kind of this neutral/cooler light, as opposed to having the color temperature be adjustable to become something warmer, for instance. Likely an area where they cut on the corners a little bit to bring the cost lower. Although I suppose one upside is the gap between the glass and also the e-ink screen underneath is actually a little bit more minimal on the Hibreak as a result, compared to the Palma that has a more noticeable kind of air gap between the layers to accommodate the additional LED lighting. In any case, Bigme also claims that their e-ink screen should be a little bit more responsive compared to generations past, so even if you're scrolling through a web page, for instance, it can still be doable, even though it's still not as fluid as an LCD or OLED screen, but slightly better compared to early generation displays, which really required much more flashing for the screen to completely reload whenever you are moving it. And again, this is a fully unlocked 4G LTE quad-band device, working with carriers like T-Mobile here in the States, in addition to supporting certain AI features that they've built in now, including their variant of ChatGPT that we'll take a closer look at, although one can argue that AI is just overused these days. On a device like this, which is more conductive to productivity, if you're doing things like reading in addition to generating notes, it actually isn't a bad idea, I would say. And it does have also built-in GPS for navigation, however it does not come with NFC, similar to on, again, the Palma. Two final points, they have also announced a more pro version coming soon, which will be powered by the Dimensity 900 processor instead, a faster CPU and GPU. So if you do need more performance, that one will be on the horizon, but expected to be roughly $100 more, and also coming with 8 GB of RAM, as well as storage coming at 256 GB, twice the amount currently found on the base version. And really the last point I wanted to mention is, unlike some of their larger e-readers or e-notes, this one does not come with any stylus support, or I should say active stylus pen support, similar to the Boox Palma, so it won't have really pressure sensitivity for handwriting memos. But on a slightly more compact device like this, it is, I would say, a reasonable compromise. Here's also a final size comparison with some other e-ink devices. For instance, The Kindle Scribe, very similar in form factor to the Remarkable. They have closer to a 10-inch display, so as you can tell, might be a little bit more conducive for things like writing and note-taking, whereas this is a lot more compact. It's more about getting short bursts of reading done wherever you are, perhaps similar to a pocket Kindle that you can again hold in one hand and slide into pockets more easily with slimmer bezels. And here's another comparison with one of their other more compact e-readers. So although on paper both devices have kind of similar 6 or 7-inch screens, because of the 2:1 aspect ratio that is more narrow and tall like a phone, you can tell that this thing is still going to be substantially smaller in overall dimensions as you are using it. Now diving deeper into the software experience, the UI has been heavily customized by Bigme. It doesn't really resemble stock Android anymore, but still is relatively easy to navigate. On the left, we have a page where we can customize with additional widgets, kind of similar to the Google News feed, and by default, you have access to a couple of utility functions which have been designed by Bigme themselves, including their version of the calculator app that also takes advantage of added contrast, not to mention their version of a clock app as well, just to take advantage of the e-ink display nature here, and you can also find their version of a simple calendar as well. Now, you do have gesture support on their UI. We can actually swipe over on the left edge here to jump into the multitasking window for closing out of background apps or jumping back and forth between them. The middle one here will take us back home, and the right here will go back by one page. You can also swipe down on the top right-hand corner to drag down quick shortcuts for turning on and off wireless options, GPS, the flashlight, as well as the front light, in addition to changing some of the display properties. For example, the contrast, as well as the kind of refresh rate frequency. So if you're consuming videos or scrolling really quickly through a comic or a web page, you might want to flick it onto a faster refresh rate mode for it to feel a little bit more responsive. But if you want to prioritize higher sharpness and resolution, then you can scale it down accordingly. A couple of modes there are provided. You can also find a kind of screen recording function here in addition to a battery saver mode, as well as Miracast is also built on in. So if there are nearby displays, you can cast the screen over, like on other Android smartphones and tablets. Last but not least, you'll find a split-screen multitasking view here as well, allowing you to run two applications at once, and you can rearrange the size of the windows as well. You don't get a pull-up app drawer. However, as you download more applications, they will be installed on additional home pages that will expand, similar to on an iPhone. And on this current second one, we have another widget which is showing us universal search, so we can type in any file name as well as app name or search the web just by typing down below. The keyboard, as you can tell, has also been reworked by Bigme to make it look a little bit more contrasty on an e-ink display, overall looking quite nice. Diving a little bit deeper into some of the preloaded apps, on the very bottom row we have a dialer, so again if you're using this to make calls like a phone, it'll be pretty self-explanatory, and overall reception quality for both Wi-Fi and cellular has been pretty decent thanks to the plastic chassis here. Text will also be shown down below here, contacts, as well as a button here to jump into the camera UI for just snapping images, and there is HDR support. Now again, the screen on this variant is in black and white, but it is a color camera sensor, so if you are loading these images on another phone or computer, they will be in full color. This is also a good example of a faster refresh rate mode on this e-ink screen. So there is still a little bit of ghosting, but again, compared to earlier generation e-ink panels, it is now significantly faster and overall still a usable experience. You can also jump into recording video at full HD resolution. Now, perhaps a better use for that camera though would be for scanning in documents. So you can use the OCR software built on in that allows you to transcribe any written notes into text for easier sharing. So as a quick example, I've actually taken an image of the box here, and as you can tell, after a couple of seconds, it's recognized as inheriting classics breaking through limits. So the accuracy here is not bad. You're able to then save or export this as a PDF or text documents for then further sharing. Taking a quick look at the reading experience next, jumping into our bookshelf, it's a pretty simple UI that we've seen on other Bigme products as well, and you're able to flip left and right again using either the touchscreen or rely on the volume keys that serves as physical page turn buttons. Again, you're able to customize how many page turns you want to initiate before refreshing the entire page, so it doesn't blink quite as much as past generations of e-ink screens, and overall text clarity still looks quite good, as you can tell here when it comes to contrast. No real issues here when it comes to overall overall legibility. You can see the percentage of the book that you're reading as well as the battery percentage down below. We can also tap to pull up some additional settings, adjusting properties like contrast, as well as for formatting. You're able to zoom in and out, crop to change the margin size, as well as skip ahead to other pages by pulling up a multi-window view. So if you want a specific page, you're able to see it a little bit more easily for larger documents. We can also invert the color of the screen from white to a black background, as you can tell there, depending on your preferences. You can also find an auto page turn functionality that will flip through the, again, multiple pages without you having to click on any buttons. You can change the duration, and also find a text-to-speech function that will read back the words to you. It's not going to be quite as smooth as a real audiobook narrated by a human, but it is one accessibility function that you'll find. Jumping into other chapters and contents in a larger book or document is also not too problematic. So overall, the reading experience feels fluid and clear enough. You can also pinch in and out, by the way, using multi-touch. Now on the very top here, you can also add any bookmarks, as well as jump into slightly more advanced settings. For example, if we wanted to flip from left to right instead of from right to left, you can go into some of those additional options. And we can also long hold on certain words to find out the dictionary definition in addition to the pronunciation. The Wikipedia article for this particular word you can also highlight as well as annotate by adding a memo. In the future, you'll be able to click on the word to check out any of your previous notes and also change the highlighting. Here's also a closer look at a full-size PDF document, so you may have to pinch and zoom a little bit more because it is a more compact screen at the end of the day. Perhaps slightly more suited for text-based books because, again, on larger PDFs you may have to pan around a little bit more, and even though the screen's refresh rate is already better compared to an earlier generation e-readers, you will still have to observe a little bit more lag compared to on an LCD or a OLED screen. That said, there really isn't any file format, including PDFs, Word documents, EPUBs, text, that you aren't able to read, and for the most part still get by with a pretty comfortable experience, reducing on some of the eye strain if you are reading back longer documents or books compared to on conventional smartphone screens. And for those wondering about manga or comics, this is an example of what that would look like on a device like this. So you still get a decent overall level of clarity, I would say, thanks to the 300 ppi resolution of the screen. Still is sharp enough, but again, that is one area where maybe the color version might be just a bit more saturated looking. And by the way, you can also see on the side there is kind of a round ball, and its position is rearrangeable. It's like assisted touch with iOS devices. You can tap to find additional options, including taking a screenshot, as well as flipping the screen orientation, jumping into the multitasking or refreshing the entire screen at a click throughout the UI. Let's also take a quick look at some of the quote-unquote AI features that Bigme have built on in. So there is one here called Bigme GPT, which is basically their version of ChatGPT. It is free to use, and afterwards you're able to ask the chatbot various questions. And you can also find a few categories on the top, including one here for composition. Very interestingly, if you're looking at slightly longer messages or replies from the generative AI, including writing an essay or poem, you can also find AI drawing on here as well. So image generation is supported on their version of this app. So as one example, I've entered the query, draw a flower in the sun, and it's then generated the image down below after just a couple of seconds. So not bad if you want to create some wallpapers. I've entered the prompt essay about time travel, and let's see what it results in. It's created an outline actually, and it just tells us to first define what time travel is and then cover some foundations, popular examples in literature and media, and then further down below here it will fill in the outline with actual information that you can then read back. As you can tell, they're almost a two-step process. Kind of clever. We can also jump over into the regular chat. These can be more general questions. We can tap on some examples. You can also use voice input as well. The device does have a haptic vibration motor, so it does slightly buzz whenever you're long holding on certain words or typing with the keyboard, providing some confirmation when you're touching the display. And the Hibreak can also read back the message if you tap here on the side. Let's try a few more examples here, including one that's asking it to help us code. So for certain tasks that you want to automate or learn more about, you can also find those steps and instructions, and you're able to save these for future reference or read them back. We can also jump into the Bigme voice-to-text app, and this one here is designed a little bit more for meetings, or if you want to use it as a memo pad. Let's tap on the recording function, and now the recording has started, as you can tell, and as we are speaking in real time, it will provide us with a text-to-speech transcription. So the transcription part does have a few more errors, as you can tell, compared to the the best that maybe Google Pixel has on their recorder app, as well as the latest iPhones. So this particular model could possibly be improved on, but you can listen back to the entire audio recording, as well as down below here, edit it to correct any small errors in terms of the text, and also click on AI Tidy and AI Summary functions. After being outputted from ChatGPT, you can tell it's being summarized into a slightly more condensed version to read back, and some of the errors are also fixed by the AI and machine learning. This might be more helpful though if you are looking at longer meetings and longer recordings in general. You want to get to main points more quickly. Here's the AI note method that will just jot down a few bullet points instead, and you can also export this as a text or PDF. So mainly giving you a smarter voice recorder app, notes app, as well as again ChatGPT for image as well as text generation are some of the built-in additions with this particular device. But since it does have the regular Google Play Store, there's nothing stopping you from accessing other apps, including regular ChatGPT if you want to install it yourself. In terms of the gallery for looking at images, again it is in black and white, but still pretty clear and sharp. Using the File Manager as well as the Music app, we can also play back some sample tracks and hear what the speaker here sounds like. So tapping on this one here. So one takeaway would be the sound is actually coming out from the earpiece up top, so it's used both for answering calls as well as going onto the higher volume level when you are listening to music. But sounds alright for just some casual music or audiobook content. Again, you can improve it with Bluetooth headphones or speakers if you prefer. And Bigme's version of the browser is also slightly different compared to stock Android. You can also opt for standard Google Chrome or Firefox if you prefer, just by installing it from the Play Store yourself. We are currently on a slightly faster refresh rate mode. As you can tell here, it still is an overall usable experience. You don't get quite as much of the slightly annoying blinks or full page refreshes that you would usually do on past generations of e-ink panels. And taking a quick look at more advanced settings, it is quite similar to other Android smartphones that we've seen in the past. You can turn on mobile hotspot as well. Additional options include screensaver, so when the screen times out, what is the static image that you want to choose, including just the Bigme logo or one with a calendar as well as clock that will be always on and refreshed at X minute intervals can also be chosen. There's also a additional teen mode, so for children you can set up a password before they're able to unlock and use certain apps. But by the way, for biometrics, this device doesn't have a fingerprint scanner, just like on the Boox Palma. It is one hardware feature that might be useful to see perhaps in the Pro version down the line. Additional performance settings include a power saving mode that will elongate the battery life by closing out of some of the background apps, and this is also where you can customize the key here on the left of the device, what a single click, double click, as well as long press can correspond to. So various functions like bringing up the multitasking, clearing out the background app, as well as refreshing the screen can all be selected. And interestingly, if you tap on more settings, it really just takes you into stock Android where we have a more familiar layout, as you can tell there, for more accessibility functions as well as stock features that are typical in Android. So that is more or less it as far as our hands-on review of the Bigme Hibreak. Overall, I'm glad to see that these compact e-readers are gaining a little bit more traction. They're certainly niche and not for everyone, but for certain folks that want to focus on digital minimalism as well as more productivity-based tasks, including just reading, limiting on some of the scrolling on social media or gaming that you might do more excessively on a normal display, this might be beneficial and also reduce some of the eye strain. Again, if you are reading lots of books as well as PDFs and documents, a device that can fit in your pocket. And as we've touched on, perhaps the biggest difference versus the Palma is the fact that it has actual cellular modem inside for connecting to mobile data in addition to accessing Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And the size is also quite helpful if you have slightly smaller hands or pockets compared to the Palma being more of a Plus or Pro size device. Despite not packing the most powerful processor, this current base version I think is already sufficient if you're just doing basic tasks, including reading as well as, again, navigating the UI. It didn't feel too choppy for the most part. Plus, some of the AI transcription and also ChatGPT functions are technically missing in the default software of the Boox Palma. It's one more software addition here, albeit, again, you can always install that yourself using the Play Store to find additional AI tools as well as other reading apps that you prefer, including the Barnes & Noble Nook app, for instance, even though the Kindle app and the WPS Office app are built in by default. So really not bad, all things considered. Maybe if we had to nitpick, having the addition of NFC or a built-in fingerprint scanner, I think could make it even more complete, as well as adjustable warmness and coldness for the glow light, but still makes it overall not too challenging to read if you are in slightly darker environments on an otherwise relatively sharp and beautiful looking e-ink display. So you can check out more details if you are interested in something like this, a super compact mobile e-reader / smartphone in this particular instance that has been the Bigme Hibreak, more specifically the black and white version of the device.